Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cooking with Chef Carole. We are being sponsored by Plant Powered Metro New York. Well, we are being presented by Plant Powered Metro New York. And I just want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone. Here in New York, we're just beginning to thaw out from a deep freeze of the last couple of days. So it's really, really nice to actually be here and not be in 2 or 3 layers. My name is Wendy Sachs, and I am on the board of Plant Powered Metro New York. And as I say, we welcome you to this show. We are being co-sponsored by the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. So a special welcome to the members of the JCC and to our own loyal members and to any newcomers who have joined us today. Plant Powered Metro New York empowers people to achieve better health and overcome chronic disease through a whole food, plant-based approach to nutrition. We offer evidence-based education, resources, and a grassroots network of support to create community and inspire change. Together as leaders, organizers, and educators, we raise awareness about the dramatic health benefits of whole food plant-based nutrition, empower individuals to make their own lifestyle adjustments, and lead projects that spark changes in food policy, practice, and food culture. I also want to say, which I probably should have been adding all along, our cooking show, or the way Chef Carole cooks, and many in our organization eat like this, is without salt, oil, and sugar. I received a message during the week about someone's surprise that we were using no salt, no oil, no sugar. So welcome to the show where we do food, excellent food, without salt, oil, and sugar. Anyway, it's February, and the farmers markets here in New York, because it's been so cold, are not offering too much these days, but you can still find potatoes and sweet potatoes and squashes and really hearty vegetables should you go to the markets. We encourage you to eat organic, and even better, we encourage you to find regenerative farmers and support the nutrition so available in the soil, into the plants, and then into your bodies. One very important announcement: this show, Cooking with Chef Carole, is turning 5 years old next month. So we are in the process of celebrating our 5th anniversary. And some of you may have received an email, or some of you may be aware, but in honor of our 5th anniversary, we are doing a fundraiser for the organization. And so far, we're only about 10% towards our goal. We're looking to raise $5,000. So if you can support Carole's tireless effort in presenting these shows, which we've done for the last 5 years, please show your appreciation by donating to Plant Powered Metro New York. And you can do a gift of $5 or $50 or $500 or just a whopping $5,000 and sponsor the whole show for the next year. These shows do cost a little bit, and so it's always great to have your donations. And if not, just sit back and enjoy the show. Couple of announcements. I'm going to try to keep these brief. We have several in-person socials this month, one in the East Village, one in Astoria, Queens. We have an in-person event and book signing that's taking place on February 26th with one of our own former board members, Dr. Gia Merlot. And this is an important one because the subject of mental health often does not get the attention it needs. And there's a lot in the mental health arena that is affected positively by going on a whole food plant-based diet or lifestyle program. And Dr. Merlot has done a lot of research on this now, and has written her book. So please come out and support her, the book signing. And for those of you who do not live in New York, you can probably look on Amazon. The book is called Restack: A New Approach to Dismantle the Blocks Holding You Back. And she'll be imparting practical strategies that help unlock the human being's fullest potential. Okay, we have an in-person event in Wilton, Connecticut. And then next month, which I'll mention here, we have a 4-part women's health series that we also encourage you to go on the website. It'll be once a week over the course of the 4 weeks, women's reproductive health, all the way through menopause and issues that women in particular deal with their endocrine system. So, and then, oh yes, a cooking and fitness show that we're doing on March 1st. So please join us for these. There's probably other events that you'll find on the website. And if you're inclined, please do make a donation to Plant Powered Metro New York. Okay, that's it for the announcements. Please let us know where you're from in the chat. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We usually allow time in the course of the show to answer questions. But if not, we'll try to reserve some time at the end and we'll get to as many as we can. That's it. Carole, what's on the menu today?
Oh, Wendy, thank you so much for all those events, and thank you for promoting our fundraiser. And we are completing 4 years this month, and next month we start 5. And it's so amazing to think that we've been a team together for this long, and that during the pandemic we were on twice a month. It's hard to imagine that we were doing it that often, but we didn't have so much to do.
Exactly.
I do want to say that it's interesting that somebody mentioned about the SOS free, because we forget to talk about it sometimes. We
Exactly.
do. We do. We just, because we've been doing it for so long, and it's on the introduction when the show starts, but we don't really talk about it, and
Right.
we don't get into the weeds of what are the health benefits of it, because we have so much to cover all the time. But if anyone has questions, obviously Wendy addresses things in the chat. And if she doesn't have an answer all the time, she actually shares it with me and we come up with a solution. So let's get started, because we're making, again, too much food for a little bit of time. But I'm very excited. I have a new plant powered Metro shirt. I'll show it to you later. I'm very excited. It's under here. It has a nice Plant Powered Metro of New York on the back. So I'm wearing that today. So I'm in a t-shirt. And it's a little cold actually. So I'm kind of glad I'm here in the kitchen. We are going to make a Moroccan soup today. I call it a fragrant, because it is very fragrant, a lentil chickpea soup with a tomato base. So normally we start the soup, but we're going to do a couple little things before the soup. And we're going to make these pomegranate glazed carrots, which, I don't know. I've been buying these carrots, these little tiny, small, see, they're about the size of my hand. And I've been buying them all week long at the grocery store here. And I've been loving them, and they just scream out, like, please roast me, because they're so tender and so beautiful, and they cook pretty fast. So we're going to actually start that, because we need to get it into the oven, because it needs to cook for at least a half an hour. But the other thing is, we're going to make a mushroom pate, which comes to me by the way of my friend Sherry, who lives here in town. She makes it when we have dinner and we're making appetizers, and I really love it. And it's really special. And it comes out of a book called Enchanted Salad, and it's by a woman named Hetty Lou McKinnon. And we're going to start with that, because we need to do a few things ahead of time, and then we'll return back to that mushroom pate. And I love mushrooms, and anytime you can eat mushrooms, it's a good idea, because they're, super good for your immune system. So we're going to make a half a recipe, and I have written out the recipe exactly how she has written it out, but I want you to know that it makes a lot. It makes so much that half a recipe got me through an entire week with eating it every single day. So I didn't have the recipe for you, but I'm sure you could do that yourself. But the first two things we need to do. So she calls for, in the full recipe, 1 ounce of dried mushrooms. And this can be any kind of dried mushrooms. I always lean towards porcini, but shiitake is definitely recommended, and porcini. So I'm using both of those. And I have measured out, and again, I'm doing half recipe. She says that it's 30 grams of dried mushrooms, which is 1 ounce, half of 30 grams is 15 ounces. I've already measured it on the scale, but I do know that probably many of you don't even own a scale. So while Wendy was talking, I actually measured it out, and I see that it's about a heaping half a cup of mushrooms. Okay, so this is shiitake and porcini dried mushrooms. Now, I do want to remind you that if you keep your mushrooms in a brown paper bag in the refrigerator, it is way better than putting them in a plastic container or even with saran wrap. When you buy them, they come that way, because you don't want moisture to build. And the brown paper bag with the mushrooms inside actually keep them so there's not moisture building up around them. And once in a blue moon, I have a few mushrooms that just shrivel down to being coming dried inside the bag. So when that happens, I just throw them in a big jar that I have on my counter of dried mushrooms. I have a big jar of dried mushrooms. And so just so you know, that can happen sometimes. And if you keep them in the brown bag, it will keep for many, many days. But if they go for a week or so and then they shrivel up, they're perfectly good and you can keep them. So probably the shiitake mushrooms that I have here in the bowl were fresh ones at some point. Now, I've got water boiling. The other thing that we need to do is we need to soak walnuts. And the full recipe calls for 1 whole cup of walnuts. But again, we're having it, so I used half a cup. So let's just get the water that I'm boiling. Now, I've also preheated the oven to 400 degrees. We're going to want a really hot oven when we cook the carrots. So we're going to just pour water over these mushrooms and over these walnuts, and then we're going to circle back to this dish later on. Okay, but I wanted you to see that all getting started. You want your mushrooms in there. That is going to create an amazing broth that we can also use. I never throw away that water because it's really delicious. And we're just going to move these things over there. Okay, so that's that. Okay, now we're going to start our pomegranate carrots. Now, I kind of made this recipe up, and I'm kind of still working out a little bit of the details. So you'll just have to excuse when I maybe say you could do this or you could do this, and maybe you'll figure out something that's even better to use. But this is one bunch of carrots, okay? This is how they're selling them in my store. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 little carrots, and I love the little that you get the little tops on. These are edible, actually. They're like parsley, but we're not going to eat them. They're actually going to go, honestly, right into my compost. But it's kind of fun to give them a little haircut. I sometimes just get the scissors out, especially when we're cooking this kind of pretty carrot. I like leaving a little bit of the green on, so it kind of just reminds you, hey, I'm a root vegetable and I've come right out of the ground. Now, when you're going to roast the carrots, I write this in the recipe for you. Do I need to peel the carrots is the question. Do I really need to peel them? I don't know, to tell you the truth. There's no one answer, okay? You definitely need to save the rubber band. I've got a big ball that I collect all the rubber bands in the drawer here. But if you're not going to wash them because all the nutrients are here in this in the peel, right? You want to really super wash them, which I actually did. But if you peel them and you take the peeler, and let's just get a peeler because I'm going to peel some of them. And let's just get the peeler. It's going to make the carrots a little bit brighter. And some of you could actually write back in the chat if you wanted, if you feel like you need to peel them or not. But it's just going to make the appearance of the carrot just a little cleaner looking, because once you get that peel off, it's almost like bright orange opposed to, the skin, which is kind of looking a little dull. But either way, I'm going to tell you is really okay. Okay. And of course, as you're peeling your carrots, you are going to want to save those peels for your broth, which I will put in a bowl, but it will eventually go right into my little freezer bag for when I make broth. So if anyone has any thing to say about peeling or not peeling, just again, make sure if you're not peeling that you're going to wash them. Now in the recipe, I said use a pound, and it doesn't have to be exact, okay? Um, this is about a pound and probably a half or a pound and a quarter when I put it on the scale, but I had not trimmed the little tops yet when I weighed them. You just want about as many carrots. Last time when I made these carrots, I literally ate all 9 of them at the same time. So it just really depends on how many people are you cooking for, and that's really about how many carrots you should make. Okay, that's what I'm going to tell you. Now, if you cannot find these beautiful little, what I call young and tender carrots, and you only can find the big fat carrots, then definitely half them and then quarter them, okay? And so that you want long and skinny. You want things to look all even. One, because you're going to cook them and you want them all cooking at the same time frame. You don't want some fat, some skinny. And then when they're long and skinny, they look really pretty when you plate them up, okay? So, I don't know. I'm gonna grab a few more only because I've been buying these at like I don't know, every time I go to the store, which is nearly every other day, I feel, I say, oh, I need another handful of these carrots because they're so special and they're young carrots. I don't know where they're coming from at the moment. Here, this one is a little long. And what we're going to do is it's a really simple recipe. We're going to use a pomegranate syrup. We're using some things today in all the recipes that maybe you don't have in your cabinet. And I want to say that you can make, I will tell you maybe what substitution that you would need to use. If you don't have pomegranate syrup, you could use a tamarind paste, or you could use a very good balsamic vinegar. That would work too. But I just want to remind all of you that when you are subbing something out, that's such a key ingredient. We're making pomegranate carrots and you're going to go use balsamic. You're no longer having this recipe. You're having one that's similar and uses the same techniques, but it's not going to taste like what I want you to taste pomegranate syrup because it's so delicious. Now, it is just like any other kind of syrup. It still has some sugar. It really doesn't have any fiber for us. It's not ideally like a health food product. But this pomegranate syrup that we're going to use has no processed sugar in it. So its ingredients literally is organic pomegranate juice and organic date syrup, organic dates. And then they make a syrup. Now, could you make your own pomegranate syrup? You absolutely could. You could cook some dates with it and reduce down some pommet, the pomegranate juice. You could reduce it in a pot and make a nice thick syrup. But I just am going to use these ones in a that's already a syrup here. Now, normally in the past, I had bought pomegranate molasses at the Middle Eastern store. That's where you really get it from. But you can find this at Whole Foods or maybe Trader Joe's. I'm not sure. I find it at my own local grocery store. So it's a product called Just Date is the brand name, and it's just dates and pomegranates. So we have all these carrots. I'm tempted to do them all, but we don't have time to sit here and peel them all. But we're going to get a nice pan for this. And I've done this now twice. I've made these carrots twice in the last like week and a half. And the first time I made them, because they're caramelizing in the pan, it gets the pan really caked on with caramel, and the sugar reduces. So this time I decided I'm going to try to use the parchment paper. And so the cleanup isn't as intense, okay? Because I hate cleaning up. And I have this parchment paper, and it's not my normal parchment paper, but someone gave me a gigantic roll, and it's this white parchment paper. I prefer the brown if you can get the brown. And this is not going to sit really well in this pan. If I put it in, I kind of have to push it in, and then it's going to pop back up. So what I do in these cases, I just crunch it up. Okay, just crunch it up. And by crunching it up, actually, it actually makes it behave a little better. It makes it behave the way I want it to, which is just kind of forming, and it's going to sit inside the pan. Okay, this is like a lasagna pan, a casserole pan. You could use a sheet pan, but you want to make sure it has a rim on it. The reason I'm using this is because it really holds in the heat, the casserole pan, more so. And I'm going to put the carrots, so they're very pretty. So they're all one direction. Now, if you want to make more fit than is actually in your pan, you could do opposite ways, go every other one. And look, I see I have room. It makes me really want to make I'm going to get two more. And I'm going to make sure that at least they're washed. Because we don't have time to peel, and we're going to have time to eat. We're going to have time to eat them, but we don't have time to peel them. So just so that they fit really nicely in my pan. Okay, so this is what this looks like. Okay, you see, it's already presentation. It's already beautiful. So what we're going to do is, normally people would put a lot of oil and then roast them in the oven. I've got the oven at 400 degrees. It actually probably should be at 425. So I'm going to increase that just a little bit. You just want a very hot oven. Doesn't matter, 400, 425, a hot oven. We're roasting the vegetables. Now, we want to use some cardamom, because cardamom and pomegranate are like a marriage in heaven. So how much cardamom? Well, I estimated when I did it about a quarter teaspoon. If you're doing many, many more carrots, maybe you want a half. Cardamom is so fragrant, and it's one of my very, very favorite spices. And I'm just giving it a really good sprinkle, and it's really sticking to the carrots because they're peeled, and it's like I'm just kind of rubbing it in. And if you wanted a little more cardamom, it's just fine. You just want the hint of cardamom in it because, again, it's a fragrant, very fragrant spice. I can't live without it. I love cardamom in my oatmeal, and I encourage all of you to try it. Okay. We are going to also use 2 tablespoons of this syrup. Now, again, if you don't have this syrup, and maybe you don't, you can use the tamarind paste. You could use a wonderful balsamic vinegar. It's all going to reduce in the oven because it has. So we're just going to measure this out and again, I kind of estimated how much syrup. You could probably get away with 1 tablespoon. Again, depending on how many carrots you have. I just want to be able to toss them. And we're going to, instead of, remember earlier I mentioned that people would normally put a lot of oil in this next. We need some kind of moisture in the pan because we need them not to get dried out. So I'm going to use a quarter cup. Let's get the measuring cup and I'm going to use a quarter cup of water. Okay. Now, this is not a scientific thing. I don't need exactly a quarter cup, but I do want water to be in the pan. And that's why I've mentioned to you to use a rimmed pan. And then I'm going to give them a little tossing around. Okay. So they get all covered. Now you're going to see this cardamom is going to kind of fall off, but it's not really gone anywhere. It's just gone into the syrup. And This is all beautiful looking. And now we're just going to put it in the oven. That's it. Okay, that's it. That is now officially going in the oven. Now
Carol,
it's good.
so good. Sorry to interrupt you, but it just looks so good. And those spices, the pomegranate and the cardamom, is that what cardamom you
Yes.
said, just already are so tantalizing. A quick question, what is the brand of pomegranate syrup you're using?
Oh, it's called Just Date. You know,
Pomegranate.
they make you know, I know that you can find it at the Fairway, Wendy. I'm pretty
Yes.
sure. But they also make chocolate chips with dates, with dates. So
Right.
if you're looking for, you know, I'm always looking at every bag of chocolate chips, like which one can I use? And I haven't tried the Just Date brand of chocolate chips, but they are made with dates. And I don't know if somebody wanted to ever try that and tell me how they like it. I don't have access to the chips unless I buy them online. Yet my store does carry this pomegranate syrup. So I thought that was awesome. So
Yes.
this is going in the oven. We're going to check on it a little bit, but it's going to reduce. And again, the water is in there helping them. Instead of the oil we're using the water so that they have some kind of moisture. So that's going to cook, and we're just going to forget about it for right now. And we're going to top that. And maybe we could do this part right now, just while we're thinking about it. This is going to be the garnish. So I come up with, I think, and scallions and some pistachios are going to be the garnish. I think it's perfect because they're both green. They're both and and these go. The pistachios go very nicely with the cardamom as well as the pomegranate. It's kind of like they're all a happy marriage. And if you didn't have pistachios, you could use some walnuts if you wanted. But you just buy a little few pistachios and chop them up. I'm gonna try to get about 2 tablespoons of chopped. I have probably just enough here. And then I'm going to chop 2 scallions, which I definitely washed. Okay. And ultimately, I kind of want to chop them all together so that they're all, so even though I'm chopping separately, I first chopped the pistachios. Now I'm chopping the scallion. We're going to use the whole scallion. Okay. And we're just chopping that. And, no, it's not so fun, but this is going to be our garnish. And I really want to blend the two together. So it's all kind of one garnish. Okay. And there's no gigantic pieces. It's going to be bright green, different color, the whites and the green of the scallion, the brown, the pistachios that look brown on the outside. And you can use this whole piece of scallion. Sometimes people think, oh, we have to throw away this top part. Never throw that away because it's all edible, right? So here is and I'm just going to give it a good chopping. Okay. And this will be our garnish, and it will be beautiful. You'll see on the carrots. And like I said, I very much like mixing the two things together. So when I garnish it all and I put it on, it all kind of gets distributed at the same time. Okay. And just this alone smells really good. Just this alone. I'm trying to think what else I would use this for while I'm sitting here chopping it. But that's enough of that. And we have a few leftover pistachios, so we're going to put those back in the cabinet. And then we're going to just put this garnish right here so it's ready for us when those carrots, which probably might not be till almost the end of our demo. So Wendy, that is our carrots. It's so simple. And again, I made the ingredient, the proportions of the ingredients for what I thought they were when I made it. It's 2 times I've made it, but you can, add more carrots. Than a pound, and you could add a little more liquid if needed in the oven when you're cooking it. And is there any questions?
There
But
are.
we're gonna.
Yeah, there actually are. Question one is quite interesting. Can you just take a quick look at the pomegranate syrup bottle and see if the sweetness is just dates or dates and pomegranates, I guess, or are there any added sweeteners in that?
No. According to the now, I want you to know this is 4-point type, okay? And it is so tiny that I probably should have a magnifying glass to
Sorry.
read it. But it literally says organic pomegranate juice and organic date syrup. Now that's what it says. Now this same company makes date syrup, and I think their date syrup is just dates.
Yes, I
So
thought so.
so I think they're just mixing date syrup that they made from dates with pomegranate juice.
Right. I
That's it.
would think so.
And what is the again? None of these syrups, even when you use maple syrup, there is no fiber in it for us. So it's not like ideal, right? But we are only using a little bit. It has zero fiber. It has sodium. It has zero sodium. And what does it say here? Calories, 17 calories, and a serving size is 1 teaspoon, one big teaspoon. But we just use 2 tablespoons, but we've diluted it with a quarter cup of water. So hopefully that. So is there any other questions that people
There are
have?
some other questions. Some actually pertain to the walnut pate and to the soup, so we can answer those in a minute. But on the syrup, it seems there's a lot of questions on this. Do you happen to know how it compares with molasses? And if not, I'll try to look it up
No,
online.
I don't know how it compares. Molasses is
Thicker,
up there. Well, it's not molasses. Sometimes this brand, Just Date, calls this pomegranate syrup.
right?
If you were to go to a Middle Eastern store, and I
Right.
do have a jar, a bottle of the Middle Eastern pomegranate, they call it pomegranate molasses.
I
So
see.
one doesn't. So some people might know of it being called pomegranate molasses, but it
Got it.
is certainly different than what we call blackstrap molasses. It is not the same thing, and I wouldn't encourage you to use that in place of a pomegranate syrup or a molasses,
Very
because
good.
it's
So
not going to be the same thing.
got it. And
But
then
how does it compare as far as nutrients? I don't have the answer to that. I just think that all syrups are syrups. Do you know, like maple syrup is going to be the same kind of thing like this, but it's not going to be. You need that pomegranate flavor.
yes, and I've tasted those and they're just awesome with the pomegranate.
And if you're
And then
only using a little bit, we have to use it in moderation. I think it's really okay to use.
great. And cardamom is a sweeter. There's a question about cardamom versus cumin. Of course, they're two different spices. But cardamom, what are some of the other ways you would use it? It's a kind of sweeter spice than cumin. Cumin has a kind of umami
Yeah, cumin
flavor.
is a different, they're both incredibly fragrant, but
Yes.
cardamom comes from the pod. Maybe some of you know the whole cardamom pod, and it's often, most commonly used in Indian cooking.
Mhm.
That's where you would find cardamom. Often you would use the pod. You also find it you could use cardamom pods when you're cooking rice because very fragrant,
Right.
very, very smells very good. Um,
Carol,
I'm
I
trying,
remember putting
yeah.
it in your oatmeal. Um,
I
when
do love it in the oatmeal. It's a real game changer in the oatmeal. So I really suggest that you try it.
Yeah, very good. All right, we can move on the
And
syrup.
I mean, those two spices, when somebody's asking this question, cumin and cardamom, I mean, they're probably the most heavenly spices ever. I mean, because they almost send you over the moon just by
I agree.
smelling them,
I
right?
I put cardamom in my coffee
Oh,
latte in the winter time. Somehow I'm not drawn to it as much in the summer, but in the winter, if I get a decaf soy milk latte, which I do, I'll sprinkle some cardamom on it, and I just love it.
and Wendy, do you remember we once made those cookies like
Oh my
that
gosh,
with
yes,
cardamom and oats and
exactly.
And I mean, cardamom and dates and oats all go together. Like
Yes.
that is like all like again another kind of marriage.
Yeah.
So you know, the more you cook, the more you learn about marriages and what does go together. And if you don't know what goes together, then you experiment and you realize, oh, that doesn't work. So don't do it the next time. It's just plain and simple. So
Amazing.
we need to start the soup. So I just want to make sure everyone is content with moving on.
Yes. Quick
And,
question on
and
this soup.
and I encourage people if they have any feedback about how they could describe the difference between cardamom and cumin. If somebody can really articulate that and put it into the chat, then do that because for me, they're heavenly spices. But it's other than saying how fragrant they are, I don't really know how to describe their differences.
Yeah, the
So
taste is quite different. Quick question on the soup. I know we're about to make it in actuality, but can it be made in a slow cooker? And quick question on the pate while we're having a tiny transition. Does the pate defrost well?
oh, it does actually. And
Great.
and so you could make a lot of it, freeze it, and it actually says in the recipe it says that you can store the pate in an airtight container for 3 or 4 days. Now, I had it for over a week. I've had it since the Super Bowl day. Okay, whenever that was, when I went to a party and there were all these things. And you can freeze it in a Ziploc bag, right? And then up to a month, for 1 month. Now I have spread that pate on every single thing that I can possibly spread it on, whether it's been a tortilla and putting salad, greens and everything in it, or using it as a dip, using it on a piece of toast, using it pretty much on everything. So
Yes.
you'll see how that works, but you can store it. So you could make the full recipe, but I'm a single person, so sometimes one recipe overwhelms me. And so overwhelms me because I don't freeze a lot of things. I freeze some things, but I choose what I freeze. And and I'd rather just make a half a recipe. I'm the first person to make a half of anything or a quarter of anything, especially when I'm even trying it out for the first time. I sometimes half a recipe just so if it's not going to be delicious, then I'm not stuck with something that I don't like.
Great.
So I think that answers those questions. And let's just start to get our pot hot and talk about, we'll leave the pate. We got to get the soup started. That part is super important.
And soup can be
Early,
made in the slow cooker?
oh, slow cooker is fine.
Yes or
It's
no?
perfect. You could do it in the Instapot. If I knew how to run an Instapot and I had one, I would do it.
Okay, good.
Wendy, my moments of like can't asking you like which button do we push and how long and when do we let the steam out and
And
like
starter soup. You answered the question.
you know, I'm the last person sometimes to use the Instapot, but it's an awesome thing if that's what you have. You could absolutely make it in that. And this soup is so versatile
Yes.
that you're gonna make it like many times, and but next time somebody says I've made it twice already and I've changed it since you made it, Carol, and I'll be like, great. you know so I've made a bunch of broth this morning. I just went into my little freezer. I didn't have any super cubes of broth, so I just put the vegetables that I had in the freezer bag, put them in a pot, cover them, boil them for like an hour and a half, and I got this beautiful, beautiful brown stock. We need 8 cups, so I have 2 quarts here, so that's our 8 cups. While we're talking and waiting for this pan to get hot, I want to tell you that I have made the soup 2 times, and I first made it with crushed tomatoes, and I really loved the texture of the crushed tomatoes. That's different than diced tomatoes. Diced tomatoes are the little squares that is probably the least favorite of mine, but the crushed tomatoes made the most delicious soup. The week before, I also made this soup. I've made it twice now with whole peel tomatoes, which I ended up just crunching up the whole peel, and that works too. And because I have to order this bio nature, I don't find it easily in my town where I live. The no salt. This is really my favorite tomatoes. This is my last can, and I'm kind of coveting it until I order more tomatoes. I thought, Wendy, you use this quite often, I
I do.
remember. And
Yep.
I thought of you when buying it actually. I thought, oh, Wendy buys that all the time. I'm gonna try that this
I
time.
like their diced tomatoes better, but I've used the strained tomatoes.
Okay, well, I thought maybe they would be closer to the crushed, and
Yep.
I did make a real agonizing decision when I was looking at the box, saying, "Do I want the dice? No, I don't think so." And so I bought the strain, and this is a very good brand. It has zero salt, and it's the Pomegranate. It's not a brand I use very often, but it's really great because it doesn't come in a can, so that's really good for the environment. And what's super great is it has no salt in it. And again, if you're using any salt in your house, maybe add some salt if you need, but don't bring home the things with the salt in it, right? Because everything has so much salt in it. And so you're going to try to bring home the things, whether it's broth that's in a box or canned tomato paste or canned beans, anything that you're bringing home from the store. Do try to buy the no salt version because you don't need that extra sodiums. You'd be shocked at how much. This actually looks really nice, Wendy. The texture of it looks really good. You'll have to try it, okay?
Yep. It's
But
thick.
it definitely reminds me of you. It's by buying it was just like, oh, that's what Wendy buys. So it's enough you and I shop together enough to know these things. So we're going to get started. The other things that we need for this soup. It's really a simple soup. I probably could tell it to you without even thinking about it and looking at the recipe. But we do need the onions, which I have here already cut. So I took one onion and I just small diced it. I have, we need to have 1 cup of finely chopped celery. And I finely chopped the celery. And I'm going to tell you, it's probably 2 to 3 stalks, just depending on how big your stalks are. So I decided instead of saying 2 or 3 celery stalks, because you wouldn't know how much we need 1 cup of celery. So that's chopped. And then I want to, while I'm talking about the celery, I want to just remind you that the tender little hearts inside, the little parts that are so, I call it the sexy part of the celery. I love, love this part. I never, in fact, my celery is still big and fat, and I only took off 2 big stalks, but I immediately reached into the middle and pulled these out. Why? Because I love it and I wanted to talk to you about it. And 2, we'll chop it up because we can use it like a cilantro, like a parsley, and never throw it away. And because it's so tender and yummy, I don't put it into the stock bag. I just make sure that it gets into whatever I'm eating. So we're going to water or broth saute. Again, we're not using the oil. I'm just repeating that based on what Wendy was talking about earlier, saying, oh, people didn't know we're not using sugar, salt, or oil. So we're not going to use any oil. We're going to have a hot pan. How do we know it's hot? Well, because I'm going to put a little water in, and if you see the steam, I can see it on the camera, but you can hear it too. And that means the pan is hot. So we're going to put in our onions. Now, those onions are going to cook. And the only reason to add a little bit of broth or a little bit of uh, water is so that they don't stick. But sometimes they don't stick at all. I mean, it just depends, but you don't need very much. You can hear when they're starting to stick. You definitely want to get them moving around for sure. I'm going to add a little teeny bit of this broth, but you could use water too at this point. Okay. This is a process that we use all the time. And for any of you who have not been on watching this cooking demos, we can caramelize these onions with no problem. They take probably good 20 to 25 minutes at least, and they would get caramelized and browned. because they have their own natural sugars in them. So of course they're going to get brown. People think that they need the oil to get it to be brown, but you don't. You really just don't. It's a habit that people use to just pour the oil in. It's just a habit. And it's a habit that you can easily break. Wendy, did you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I was in the middle of answering somebody on the chat and I had pressed a wrong button.
Oh,
Sorry,
it's okay.
everybody.
I could see you. Sometimes I'm talking to you and you're not there, and sometimes you're presently there. So I always know
Really
you're
sorry.
there behind the camera. Um,
I'm just answering.
So
Yeah.
this soup is good because it's interesting. This soup doesn't have any garlic in it, and almost every soup has. I have a friend here in town that cannot eat any garlic, and every time I think about what would I bring to her or how would I invite her over, because I don't know if I know how to cook without garlic. And when I was making this soup, it has no garlic in it. I decided no garlic, and it's actually just perfect. So I kind of am touting that it has no garlic because I have a friend that doesn't eat garlic. And if you want to be able to cook for your friends, and everybody these days seems to have something that they can't eat, it's good to kind of file it in your head. Oh, I'm going to make that for such and such person because they can't have garlic. So anyway, I'm pouring just a little more broth because it was sticking in the pan. It's cooking quite fast. So we just want to cook this for a few minutes. I added the celery. This is when you would add garlic, but we have no garlic to add. But what we do have to add is ginger. And we really want fresh ginger. And I grated my whole ginger root, so I didn't save that to show you. But we need 2-inch piece of ginger. And you can peel it or not peel it. It's kind of the same thing with the carrots. You can or you can't. It's really okay. There have been plenty of times that I've been super lazy and don't feel like peeling the ginger, and I've just washed it off, and eating the skin is just fine. It's not going to kill you. Okay? But we have the ginger already grated. I grated a bunch of it. I did it in the food processor. So I have a lot of it, and I'll put a cover on it and put it back in the fridge so that I can make some kind of, I don't know, sesame dressing or something with ginger in it. So we need 1 big tablespoon. That's what I'm going to say. 2 inches equals like 1 big tablespoon. So we're going to throw that in there right this minute. And we're going to remember to save the rest of that. And then I didn't measure out any of my spices ahead of time this time because we don't have a lot going in here. We have some cinnamon and some turmeric, 2 things. And we need, and coriander. I didn't get coriander out. And what is coriander? Just 1 second, I have to get the coriander. Coriander. Ah, Coriander is something we used a couple weeks ago back when we were making the falafel. And coriander, I'm really tight on my spice space. So I have whole coriander seeds here, but I always grind fresh the coriander, actually grind the seed. So I have in a little bag sitting on top a bag of ground coriander. So when I run out of this bag, I then grind some more. That's my way of having 2 spices in 1 jar. I kind of do that frequently, actually. So let's get the spices in here and let's just see what we need to do. We need a 1/2 teaspoon. So we didn't measure any of these things out in advance. So we have to get a 1/2 teaspoon. And we need a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. Okay? How about that? Cinnamon in the soup. Okay? And then we need a teaspoon of turmeric. And I have a 1/2 teaspoon here, so we're just going to do it 2 times. A 1/2 and then another 1/2. Now, I have mentioned this before, and I'm just going to reiterate it. You do not bring the whole jar over here while the steam is occurring, and you don't want to get your steam inside your jar. You always want to measure and then bring the spoon. Measure and bring the spoon, okay? Because you do not want steamed spices. The moisture that gets in there is going to kind of ruin the spice inside. You don't want to add any extra moisture. Now we need 1 teaspoon of coriander, ground coriander. I still have the 1/2 teaspoon in my hand, and I'm too lazy to get the full one, so we'll do that 2 times, okay? So again, we have a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, we have 1 teaspoon of turmeric, and 1 teaspoon of coriander. And I can hear that things are getting a little stuck. I can hear this. So I'm just going to put a little teeny bit of liquid, just a little bit, not a lot. And now everything is moving. And we're just going to cook this sauce. The onions and the celery with spices, and just till it's fragrant. It just needs a couple minutes of cooking. And then we're going to start putting in the remaining ingredients. Okay? So this looks delicious. I'll show it to you. I'll take this hot pan off, and you can see this is what this is looking like. Okay?
Wow, looks delicious.
And it smells fantastic. Okay? So what are we good? Let's get rid of these spices. Let's just get them out of our way for now. And we'll continue with our list. We need 1 cup of dried lentils. For this soup, I'm using the brown lentils. You could use the French the French lentils. They hold up very nice, those dark green little lentils. You could even use a beluga lentil if you wanted. But I'm using the brown lentils. I didn't have quite a cup of brown lentils, so I added a few of the green ones. I am soaking these. You want to wash them always, just to go through them, sift through them, make sure there's any stones in there. But because I wanted to speed up the cooking, I soaked them for a couple hours now. They've had water, and they have a little water in them, and I'm just going to go ahead and add them all with the water, because it's okay. We don't have to bother to put them through a colander or anything. Just getting them in the pot is good. So that's the lentils. Then we need 1 can or 1 container. So if you're using it to crush tomatoes or the whole tomatoes, you're using the big can, right? But today we're using the pomegranate, and it's not quite as much tomatoes as a can. This is 26 ounces and the other is 28. And I'm just going to pour the tomato, what they call the string tomatoes. Wendy says she prefers and likes the diced ones. Maybe next time I'll buy those of this brand. You have to find the things you like. But already, to me, this is looking fantastic. Looks much, I like it better than the whole tomatoes, actually. Now, there's a lot of tomato sauce left in here, so there's no way I'm letting that escape, right? So we're gonna add eventually the broth, and I'm just gonna use this. I poured the broth into here, and we're going to swish it around a little bit. We could use a spatula if we want here, just to get those sides really clean. We don't want to lose any of that tomato paste, tomato strained tomato. And in the meantime, this is cooking crazily. We also, before we add the vegetable broth, we want to do 1 tablespoon of tamari, just 1 tablespoon. And we're going to do that. I have low sodium tamari here. If you don't like and can't use any kind of soy product, you're welcome to substitute that with a coconut aminos. That would be just fine. So 1 tablespoon of that. Then, even though we've used tomato base, we're still going to put in 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, because I found that the tomato paste really gave it that it rounded out the flavor in a really nice way. So let's just rinse this out right now here, dry it off. And I'm just going to get my little 1 tablespoon, which disappeared. I don't know where it went. Oh, here it is. It's closer to me than I realized. And this is that brand that I love so much called Bio Nature. And they make no salt tomato paste. And what I like about it is that it's in a jar. Now, I go through that pretty quickly, almost, pretty regularly. So I never have it spoil on me. But I remind all of you that if you're not gonna go through it quickly because you're not cooking all the time and you're not reaching for the tomato paste. For some reason, I'm always reaching for the tomato paste. Then freeze some of it in a little foil packets, and then put the foil packets in your freezer. That's what I used to do, but this little jar actually can stay quite some time in your refrigerator door. So that we've used that. And then we're gonna need to have some blah, 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 fresh cilantro and fresh parsley. And we're gonna, oh, yep, we're gonna add that later. So let's get the broth in. We haven't put in our chickpeas. You see, that's super clean now. That makes me very happy. So that is gonna go in the sink like that. Now, we need chickpeas in the soup because it's called a chickpea lentil soup, and without the chickpeas, where are you? So we need approximately how many did I say? 3 cups of cooked chickpeas. Now you can buy 2 cans and it's going to give you 3 cups. 2 cans of chickpeas, you would drain them, get rid, save the liquid for the aquafaba for another occasion, and you would use the canned. But honestly, I just want to encourage you to learn to cook your own beans. It doesn't require, people say, well, I don't have time to do that. But it's not like you're attending to them every moment, okay? Last night, I went to bed and I soaked the chickpeas. I took 1 cup of chickpeas, maybe a heaping cup, okay? A big heaping cup of chickpeas. I put them in a pot and I covered them with several inches of water. When I woke up this morning, they had totally expanded. And then while I was, I don't know, doing other things around the house, I put a flame underneath the pot and cooked the chickpeas. And in about an hour, they were done. Okay, so it took no time, and economically, the reason to do it yourself is because it is economically makes more sense, because it's a lot less money to buy dried beans and make them, they go for a longer, there's, you make more, you get more for your dollar, okay? But if you, I always have canned beans in the fridge, in the pantry. I am not going to lie to you that I am just all the time cooking fresh beans. I do cook fresh beans, but I have as a backup in case suddenly I want to have black beans and I don't have time to cook black beans. Maybe I haven't thought about it in advance and I suddenly want to have it in a burrito, or I want to have it on a salad. I do have cans and I buy them when they're on sale. And you always want to get the no salt. Okay, so we need 3 cups. This does have some broth in it, and I would never throw away if when you're cooking your beans, especially the white beans. The broth is really good. It's just like having broth that you've made from vegetables. So I'm actually going to use some of that broth, but I'm just going to drain some of it here because we don't need all of this. So I'm going to carefully put, oops, I'm making a terrible mess on the counter. It's an embarrassing flood. But let me just get a spoon now because that was not a good method of doing that. You always try things and you never know if they're going to work. But we need 3 cups of chickpeas, okay? I probably have a little more than I need. So here's 1 cup, okay? And then we're going to do 2 cups. And I'm using this really great spoon that has holes so that I leave a little bit of that broth behind. And I'm not going to ever throw out that broth. That broth can make more soup, more stock. Maybe, if I need to add a little more vegetable stock to this very soup, I would use the liquid that I've now poured some of it on the counter. That's 2. And now we need 3. And if 3 is really a quart of beans here, then I didn't even have to measure them. But they're not. It looks like it's close, but not close. Yeah, it's almost a quart of bean. So that's your beans. Okay. So that is, I believe we're going to double check to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything, because sometimes I do tend to forget something. So we did our chickpeas and we cooked them in advance. Onion, celery, ginger, cinnamon, turmeric, coriander. Our lentils are well washed and we pre-soak them just to speed things up. We added our tomatoes, right? We added our tomato paste. We added 8 cups of broth, which we did. We added our tamari, and all we have left to do eventually is add the cilantro and the parsley. That is all we have left to do. So this is going to stay right here like this so that we can continue to mix. And I'm going to use up this celery this very second. I'm not going to wait until we get our, what do you call it? Our parsley and our cilantro in there. I'm just going to chop this up and get it into the soup. And again, this is not in the recipe, but because it's what I call the sexy part of the celery, and I love it. It's so tender and so delicious. If you make tuna salad, this is one of my favorite things to put in the tuna salad beside the celery. Anytime that you're using chopped celery into a dish, you could absolutely use this part, this leafy part, because it's really adding more celery flavor. The leaves are so delicious. I really love them. So for now, we're eventually gonna chop parsley and cilantro to go in the soup before it ends. But we're just gonna get this in there like that. And that truly is our soup. And despite me pouring liquid on the counter here, we're gonna move this right over here. And we're gonna peek at the carrots. Oh, they're happening. Just let's see what's happening. Let's just Let's just clear this up and I'll show you what's happening in the oven. Wendy, are there any questions? Now would be a good moment to ask about the soup.
Yes, there are. There's several questions actually about the pot itself, like the difference between saute pot, frying pan, and a stock pot. So the last question was, would a stock pot work as well as a saute pan? And what's the difference between a saute pan and a frying pan?
Okay, well, a saute pan and a frying pan are basically the same thing. They're the flat pans that we would cook things at a low. This is a saute pan. Okay, this is a saute pan. It's a flat pan and it looks like this. Okay, that's a saute pan. It could be called a fry pan, but that's an old school word. I feel like no one ever talks about a fry pan, but this is what you would call a saute pan. This is often called a Dutch oven. Okay, a Dutch oven is also very similar to a pot that you would cook broth in. Only the Dutch ovens are often made out of cast iron, and I have 2 of them. This is an investment. This particular one that I use, that you all see me cook in all the time, I literally have had this pan since I was in college. Maybe that's 30 years ago, okay? Have I burned this pan? 1,000 times I have burnt things in it. It always comes back to looking like new. I love this pan, but it costs $300. So if you cannot afford a nice cast iron pot that you would use all the time, buy a Lodge, Lodge. They're about $80 and they're very heavy. They're heavier than this Le Creuset, but they work just as good. I have one. It was gifted to me. I love it. It's quite large. I could show you what that looks like just to show you, but it's heavy. It weighs a lot. You have to be super person to hold it. It's just heavier. It's of the same material as the Le Creuset, but for some reason, because I don't know if it's inexpensive, it weighs a ton. I tend not to use this pan as much, but it's a little bigger than that one. The one that I have, the Le Creuset, actually is what they call their soup pot, because it's not going straight like this. It has kind of a rounded bottom. So I hope that answers the question. If anybody hopefully that answers the question, Wendy.
Yes, it does. Well, I certainly thought it did. I hope our participant is satisfied as well. There is a question. I'm sorry, going back to the carrots, which I'm assuming that cinnamon can be substituted for cardamom if somebody doesn't like cardamom.
Yes,
And
yes. I think, and again, I just want to reiterate. Everybody has some kind of something. They don't have it in their pantry, or they're allergic to it, or there's something. But I really want to reiterate that when I put together certain ingredients, it really is about the marriage of those flavors. So the
mhm,
minute you change something out, you're not using pomegranate molasses or syrup, and you're using balsamic vinegar. It's going to be good. It's just not going to be what I've just provided. So as
and
long as you keep that in mind, then that's just fine. That's
would
okay.
you say that dill added to the carrots would be a divorce, heading for a divorce in terms of
A little bit,
syrup?
yes, a little bit. I love that word, Wendy. It's a divorce.
Well,
I
there
did.
was a question. The legitimate question was, would dill be too savory with the syrup? For my taste buds,
Oh,
it
for
certainly does.
sure.
But really, for everyone, a lot of this is your own tastes and your own experimentation. But I wouldn't put dill with the syrup for my sense of the taste. But yeah, that's
You want to hold, these are pungent. These are like really like, let's like really knock everyone's socks off with flavors that they've never had. Then you're going to use the cardamom, you're going to use the pistachios, you're going to use the scallions. You're
yes.
not going the delicate dill way. That's a way to go, but it's not this way to go. It's like going down one road and then going down another road. You might eventually get there, but it's not the same.
Mm, very good.
Okay, so we're going to look at the carrots because I think they're looking a hair dry, just a hair. Maybe because I'm cooking them on parchment paper this time, opposed to the last time I cooked them. But let's just analyze the situation because they really are. This is what's happening. They look a little dry. Can you see?
Yeah.
But they are the caramelizing. It's happening. And where is? Sometimes I don't know where things are. Actually, that I actually need. We'll just use this tool here. Oh, I brought it. It's as close to me as it could possibly be. We're just going to rotate these. Oh, everything is fine. Every single thing is absolutely fine. There's plenty of liquid hiding underneath. It was just the tops of the carrots looking dry. Okay. And how long are we cooking these for? Well, it's been almost 25 minutes or so. We want them to be done. Okay. And how are we going to know when they're done? Well, they're probably getting done. We could put a fork in them right now. It's like just testing the, like a potato or a beet, anything that you cook. And, the fork is going in pretty easily. So they're almost done, but I really do want them to be a little more glazed, a little more shiny. And I've turned them off. And the glaze is, they don't look dry anymore. I'll show them to you so that you see that I kind of thought that they were in trouble, but they're not in trouble. So here's what they're looking like.
Wow, they
Okay,
look
you
so
see,
good.
just roasting them and moving them, jiggling them around. They're just fine. They're just fine. I just want them to get a little browner. So they're gonna go back in maybe for 5, 6 minutes, or maybe just till we finish the pate. I mean, we're in we got things to do, and we're just like, maybe they'll stay in the oven till we're ready to take them out. But they are almost done because the fork went through them just fine, very easily. Now this soup is going to cook, and at the very end, we're going to definitely add the cilantro and the parsley. And if we want, we could add a little squeeze of lemon juice. That would be delicious. But let's move on to the next thing, okay? Unless anybody has questions still about the soup or anything we've done, but we're
Nope,
heading towards the final thing.
very good.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so This recipe, like I said, comes from my friend Sherry. She makes it all the time. I'm always bringing a dip or two, and then she is always making this one. And I'm like, you know what? I've got to have the recipe because it's so delicious that I must try it. Okay. Now, we are going to, you know what I'm going to do? We want to have this burner. And so what I'm going to do really quickly here is we're going to make room on the stove. And we're going to definitely just move the soup to the back. We are going to let the soup cook on the gas burner, which is really good. And we're going to put a kind of a medium flame, and we'll watch that. Now, I told you we're making half recipe. I'm getting my favorite little Ozeri ceramic pan. This could be called a skillet. This could be called a saute pan. It is a flat pan. It is made of ceramic. I love this pan so much. So we have soaked the mushrooms and we have soaked the walnuts. We're going to get a little colander and we are going to get a jar because I don't want to lose this wonderful mushroom broth here. So we're going to just put this in here. I'm going to try to pour carefully. Now, for us to really use this broth here, you would often want to strain it through a cheesecloth because sometimes there are sediments in the bottom. But I actually see that it's fairly clear and I don't see any dirt or debris. You only really need to do that. Now, if you needed to, you saw some debris, then you would take these out. You could put a paper towel or a coffee filter and then run the broth back through with the paper towel or the coffee filter or a cheesecloth, and it would catch those sediments. But never ever throw out when you've reconstituted your mushrooms. Just never throw it out. And then we're going to want to strain this walnut water. And I don't have any reason to really keep the water, honestly, of the walnuts. So we're just going to let that strain. Now, I said we're using half. We need half of a leek. And let me get this in front of me because the problem with me is I make something one or two times and I just start to memorize things. And then I forget to tell you something. And then someone has to say, well, what about that? Now, leeks you always want to cut open. And there is always, and I guarantee you, there is dirt. Dirt everywhere, okay? I usually chop them first. We're only going to use half because we only need half. You always want to chop and then rinse. But at this moment, because I see where this dirt is, I'm literally going to just run it under water, and I'm going to remove that dirt. Like I said, normally I chop first and then I take a colander and I run the water through all the chop. Now, all of this mixture is going to eventually end up in the food processor. So you don't have to chop anything so that it looks pretty. And you might think, oh, she's got such a little tiny little 7-inch pan. How is she going to do this? Well, it all fits in there, believe it or not. So we're using the white and the green part. And we're going to saute the onions. I'm going to leave a little bit, just a tail of this behind for the composting. And this is going to go in the pan. And you'll see I didn't quite get the green all totally chopped. Or there's parts of it that is just not chopped. But this is good. Okay, so this is going to saute. So we're sauteing that. And we're going to put, and we still haven't put our other bit of broth in the pot. But as the soup cooks, it's going to absorb and it's going to need this. But for now, it's back there. But we're going to use a teeny bit of this broth. And again, this is going to go into that pot, that soup pot eventually. And maybe we won't need all of it because I put the lentils that have been soaking in the water. I put a little water. We'll see how much of the broth we need, but we'll figure it out. But in the meantime, what's happening with the soup is it's going to absorb the liquid because those the cooked chickpeas, but the lentils are not cooked, not cooked. So it's going to start to need to have the liquid and it's going to absorb. Now we want to take our mushrooms that we rehydrated and we want to just give it a good rough chop. Okay. Now today, remember I mentioned to you that we're using some spices and some items that maybe you don't have. And I didn't have 5-spice powder because I don't know, I've always had a limited amount of where I've kept my spices. And although I have probably 45 to 50 different little jars of spices, I looked and I was like, oh, this recipe calls for 5-spice powder and I don't have it. Now, my friend Sherry said she really likes this recipe. When she didn't have the 5-spice powder, she used fresh rosemary and thyme. And that makes total sense to me because that's another marriage that is totally acceptable because mushrooms love rosemary and they love tomato and love thyme. Those two things really go. So if you are not wanting to buy 5-spice powder for your cabinet because you don't know when you're ever going to use it again, normally 5-spice powder goes into Chinese cooking and it's made up of star anise, cinnamon, fennel, and Szechuan peppercorns and cloves are in it too. So usually buy it it's all a blend already. And we're going to put these onions are cooking and we're going to put these mushrooms, okay, in there. So that is my dehydrated mushrooms. We're not going to mess with. Now I have here regular mushrooms. This is a container of cremini. The full recipe calls for a whole pound of mushrooms, but I'm making a half, which is actually one of these small containers that you would buy at a store. And this would be 8 ounces. So half of a recipe, again, is 8 ounces because it calls for a pound. And like I said, I knew that we'd be at the top of the pan. It's a little tiny pan. And I'm, a little bit crazy for trying to use a little teeny pan. But because the mushrooms kind of are like spinach, they cook down in just a very few minutes. That they won't be exploding out of the top for too long. And again, I have the chickpea water here. I have the broth here. Just going to add just a teeny bit. Teeny bit. You can hear it sizzling. Okay, so, and we want to cook these mushrooms. Okay? And that looks it's smelling so good. And we haven't added any spices yet. We haven't done anything. We do need to eventually add the 5-spice powder and the chili flakes. Now, here's the 5-spice powder that I bought. I'm able to buy bulk spices. I haven't found a little jar in my kitchen yet to put the 5-spice powder in. But I have to tell you, I brought this home, and for at least 3 days now, it has smelled up the entire kitchen because it is so fresh smelling, so fragrant. It's the anise, the cinnamon, the cloves, all of it ground together. It's a blend that's already made for me. I don't have to make it you could make it yourself. You could look it up and try to make it yourself if you'd like. But I've just bought it. So we need 1 teaspoon for the full recipe and a half a teaspoon for a half. And I think I need to look at the carrots. Oh my gosh, the carrots are super done. I'm going to stop them. I'm going to just stop them till we're able to take them out. So I'm using a half a recipe of the 5-spice powder. And you could use fresh rosemary and fresh thyme at this very time, if that's what you've decided to do. And then we need red pepper flakes. We need a 1/4 teaspoon for the half recipe. 1/4 teaspoon, and I don't know if I can find them here. Oh, here we go. 1/4 teaspoon. Okay, and 1/4 teaspoon is going. I'm going to do a little tiny more. Okay, that is that. Okay, those are all going to get put away. We're going to need some fresh black pepper. I'm just going to do it now so I don't forget. You could do it when it's all blended too, but I'm doing it now while I remember. And we're going to move this. And we're going to move all the things that we've used. And we're going to need this water, this mushroom water, when we blend. Okay, and ultimately, all we're trying to do here is cook our mushrooms. Okay, we're just sauteing them. They look like that and moving around the spice. It's all getting blended, cooking, and this is going to be mixed. Usually, you would let it cool off a little bit, maybe 10, 15 minutes. But because we're dealing with a time frame here where we have to finish and we have to serve things up. Let's just get some of the stuff out. We're going to go ahead now and put our half a cup of soaked walnuts into the food processor back here. Okay. Let's get rid of all these things. Let's get rid of, we're going to need this broth back here. We're going to bring that back there. And let's, and we need garlic. We're going to need garlic in our, we need 3 cloves in the full recipe. And I'm going to just put a clove in, we'll put 2. We'll put 2. I'm not even bothering to chop those because they'll get processed in the food processor. So we're going to turn this off now. Okay. Again, I would recommend that you don't do what I'm doing right now, but you would cool this off. You would let it cool before you go blending it. But I'm going to put it in with the walnuts. It's cooked. It smells heavenly. Okay. Soup needs stirring. You know, all of you get to watch me, and I'm doing like 3 things at one time, trying not to lose my mind, and which I sometimes feel I am. And let's turn that off. Let's just make sure we stir the soup so it doesn't burn at the bottom. Okay, soup is definitely cooking. We're probably not going to be able to serve the soup because it's maybe not going to be done, but that's okay. It is all okay. Let's bring the soup actually back here now. Let's just bring the soup close by so I'm not wondering and worrying about it. Let's bring the soup. And before we go pureeing the thing in the back, we're going to chop some fresh herbs for the soup. So I don't forget to finish it in front of you. Now, you can do, I say 1 tablespoon of cilantro, 1 tablespoon of parsley. You could do as much as you want. I'm using the stems too, okay? The stems, people throw them out of the cilantro and the parsley, but they're good, okay? So don't throw them out, okay? I'm doing a little more than I suggested in the recipe. I said 1, oops, I got too much cilantro here. But we're just going to get this cilantro and parsley in the soup so it begins to cook. Let's put these stems back. Okay. We're just going to chop this up very quickly. And Wendy, is anybody having questions at this moment before I go processing the pate?
No, we are in good shape. And I did go ahead, and I'm going to do it out loud now as well. Ask the audience if you would be interested in a class just on blending spices. It's something we, Carol and I, and our producer Jim had talked about. And so I see a couple of you have answered yes. And there is an idea of maybe, especially for salads, a participant says, Anne says, so far, Carol, there is a desire for a spice.
Okay, so what I want to preface it, Wendy, and I really love that you've asked because it's a class I've wanted to do forever. And I've been worried that people don't have enough spices in their cabinet and they see that if we just make 3 blended spices, maybe they need 10 to 15 spices and they'll be like, oh my God, we don't have that. But if all of you are shaking your head or answering in the chat saying, yes, we like this idea, we could make a class where we just make 2 or 3 kinds of spices. I mean, we've made dukkha before, which is fantastic in salads.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a barberry Ethiopian spice, which is a real game changer. There's gunpowder. There's so many kinds of. Today is 5 spice blend. That is definitely a blend. These are spices that you have, whether it's a Cajun spice or base seasoning. These are all blends that I want to say really change up things. But you have to be willing to make a blend. And
Yeah,
you have to be willing to
performance.
maybe have 5 or 7 different spices.
Different spices, exactly. A number of the names responding, I know that you've been on this, you've been following us for a while, so I trust you probably have the, a good cabinet full of spices. One person mentioned lemon pepper, which was something we
Ah,
really talked about. Let's see, spice blends come with salt and even dry, some have oil. Correct. So that's why we were thinking of maybe just doing a class devoted to spice
and
blends.
you know what? And when I see that there's salt in something, we made dukkha, and that's my favorite
Right.
spice blend.
Mhm.
And it does have like a teaspoon of salt for a big jar, but just omit it because honestly, it's like the everything spice. They make at Trader Joe's. I'm always looking because I love seeds so much, and it's that everything spice that goes on top of a bagel. That is an amazing spice for salads because it has granulated onions and poppy seeds and sesame seeds, but it always has a salt in it. But just skip the salt. If you're making it, then you can skip the salt. So I think it could be an interesting class. I just wanted to see if people were interested in doing it. And Wendy, thank you for asking. And you'll tally up if people. I think a lot of people do have spices, but I always wonder because maybe you're brand new and you've never, you're just starting out and you're having to build up your spice cabinet. You don't just end up with 60 spices like Wendy and I overnight. That happens over time when someone says, oh, I need to make this pate and I need 5 spice powder. Well, you go buy it and then it's in the cabinet. And spices can last 2, 3 years if you're not storing them next to your oven. Okay, you never want to store them next to your oven. People do that and they think it looks very pretty, but you don't want to do that. You ultimately don't want to do that.
Right. And Judy, a viewer, mentioned that it's important to make sure your spices are fresh. Agreed.
Yes, agreed,
Fresh.
agreed,
Yeah.
agreed. So we're gonna start to get some things plated, Wendy, only because time is of essence.
Yes, we're
Um,
probably going to run
as
over.
much as I could be cooking and talking to you, and yeah, I mean, look, if we could talk for till the cows come home and have cooking, I could continue to cook. But that's not why we have people here that have lives and they've tuned in for a very short time. So we need to move on. It's very important to just get things accomplished and be done and not talk forever. Okay. And here's our beautiful carrots. Now I did leave them in for maybe a few minutes more than one should, but that's okay. If you leave them in longer than you should, you just, I don't know, you just say, okay, I've done that, but they're going to be beautiful. And they're not as shiny as they normally are because I left them in for extra minutes and all the glaze kind of got absorbed into their carrots. But they're going to be as delicious as they're supposed to be. It's just that they got a little bit, the glaze kind of got all absorbed. See, I can see the difference between the few that I didn't peel. So I guess, see, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to put paper this time, because the last time I didn't put any paper, I actually had to clean up that sugar, that kind of like caramelized sugar, and I had to let the pan sit in my sink for almost 2 days. So this kind of alleviates putting the paper in, and maybe I'll have to adjust the recipe a little bit, because maybe the paper, instead of just putting them in the pan directly, which is what I did the first 2 times, uh, that maybe the paper absorbed a little bit of the water and a little bit of the glaze. So now we're going to put the garnish on top, right? It's going to be beautiful. Just put a little, and we have a lot more garnish than we need. This can go into a salad or go into rice if you have leftover. So this is going to be our carrots, okay?
Gorgeous.
And then we need to finish the pate right away. We can't just stop the show. So if this pate needs a little liquid to move it around because it's too thick, I'm going to add that mushroom liquid that we rehydrated. Let's just get that going. And you always want to stop the bowl and scrape the sides down. You have to do that. You cannot, it climbs up the sides. And you do want your pate, it's up to you. You could have it have a little texture, but really pate is something that's pretty smooth. So you really do want to use that liquid, okay? So I'm just going to add a little more liquid while we're talking.
While Carol's blending, I'm
Wait a
just going
second.
to, we're at the 6:30 mark. So while she's blending, I'm going to quickly just remind you to please go to the Plant Powered Metro New York events page. We have several events coming up, an in-person event that's a book signing on whole food plant-based living and mental health, which should be quite an interesting book and presentation. By the way, that's also for fulfilling your own potential, whether you have mental health issues or not. These days, given all the news, it's hard not to. But anyway, besides all that, please do come if you're anywhere in the city or near the city. And then we have other socials in the city, and then online we have a very exciting lineup for a women's health series, a 4-part series next week. You can come to 1, 2, or all 4. And then very important for our survival actually is we are turning 5 years old as a cooking show anniversary next month in March. Our next show is going to be March 23rd, and right about then is when Carole and I and Plant Powered Metro New York shifted from an in-person class at the JCC into a online class, and we've been doing it now for 5 years. So in honor of the 5th anniversary, we are asking you if you'd like to make a donation to Plant Powered Metro New York, specifically for the cooking show. And because it's our 5th anniversary, ideally increments of 5, so 5 or 50 or 500 or 5,000. We're looking to raise $5,000 for the show so we can continue on in the next year or two and onwards. So if you're inclined, please go ahead and make a donation. And Carole, I think we're ready for plating, and really.
Yes, we are. So we don't have the time to make it as beautiful as I normally would, but I just want to show you that I put the pate in a gigantic ramekin, and I put a little red pepper, roasted red pepper on the top. If you're looking at the recipe that I provided in the photograph, I actually put a piece of saran wrap in this gigantic ramekin, and then I laid some red peppers inside, and then I put the pate, and then I flipped it over. So you can decorate it however you want. I've made little tiny toasts out of Ezekiel bread. I cut up into little tiny triangles, each piece into 4 triangles, toasted it, and you're just going to literally, and it's very delicious with red peppers, but you're just going to literally kind of put it on your toast, or you could put it on your tortilla, however you want. You could also add a little bit of red pepper to the top if you'd like. You know, if you, this is a gigantic one, so you really wouldn't want to do that, but I don't have a cutting board right here to chop that up, but just showing you that that pate is fantastic and can
Looks
be
great.
made in the refrigerator, stay there, you can freeze it. And we're going to taste the soup. We're going to turn this off. I'm sure the lentils probably need a little more cooking, but we're just going to taste it. I'm going to add, after we finish, a little more broth. It's starting to cook down, and I know that it will need a little broth, but let's just taste it. The flavor is there for sure. And like I said, I'm gonna add a little more of this broth, and it's just gonna continue cooking. And not necessarily, we are having a ladle right here, and I just want to show you what it potentially could look like. The soup, it's looking very beautiful with the lentils. I love that it has small and, you know, the big chickpeas. So this is what the soup looks like. I just want you to see. And I'm going to pour it back in because I want it to cook a little bit more. But we have done it all. As always, I've done too many things in a short amount of time, but because I'm always so excited to be with you, I have to show as much as possible. Wendy and
Awesome.
Jim, I'm thankful for our time that we have invested these last years to all together once a month. And we will start our fifth year. And as Wendy said, please donate to our cause. We take some time and money, and we know that you may become free, and we welcome all of you. We need a community. We want to be supportive, but things do cost money to produce. So please, if you can, $5, as Wendy mentioned, $500, $5,000. Become a sponsor for $5,000. But thank you to the amazing team for we come together. We put lots of energy into this, and we appreciate all of you showing up. And thank you so very much.
Yes, and I'm just going to reiterate that because I'll tell you, Carol, the comments that are coming through the chat, Carol doesn't get to see them. Obviously, I do. And Jim behind the scenes is also paying attention, but you're getting a tremendous amount of thank yous, Carol, which I will relate. And I do want to give a shout out to Carol from Maryland, who has not missed a single show. And I think Ellie also has been here over the last 5 years. And many of you actually have. So we could not do this without you. We're very, very grateful. We love doing it for you and with you. And we're always behind the scenes cooking up something as well. And Jim is as well. So anyway, thank you to all of you. A big shout out and thank you to James Spellos, who helps us, as I said, behind the scene. And you can reach Carol at the Veggie Vanguard. She's also on Instagram at the Veggie Vanguard. And please go to our website, plantpoweredmetronewyork.org, and check out our events. And please join us for all the events we have going on in the rest of February and March. All right, we will see you next time. March 23rd is our next cooking show. Okay, see you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.